get the offense going, Paul. I mean, that's why the buy-in isn't there for Mark Keenum and John Cohen at the level that they want it. And so he has to get the offense rolling. He's got the quarterback, Paul. Garrett Schrader. I mean, I get it. There were big names like there is every year in the SEC. And John Rice Plumlee kind of stole the headlines in this state for 6-7 weeks. But Garrett Schrader can play, and he's the real deal, and he has a chance to be really good. But Joe has to get this thing going. And I think there's a lot of pressure on Joe from the administration to win the Music City Bowl. I know that sounds ridiculous because a lot of people roll their eyes at bowl games outside the college football playoff. But I think that there is a lot of pressure from the administration, and they have let the staff know that this is a very important game in their eyes. The Egg Bowl was a big win. That was a team that was pretty evenly matched. Ole Miss seemed to be playing better going into the game, maybe had a little more buzz. MSU played well. They did what they needed to do to win a hard-fought. I thought it was a great game, Paul. I'm not sure if you got – I mean, I thought it was
it was amazing.
Was incredible. I thought it was a really, really good game. And so I think they want him to build on the Egg Bowl and win the Music City Bowl and show some things on offense. So I think it was a good day for Joe, and it was a good Thanksgiving for Joe, but there's more to be done. Well, it's not going to change as far as his job status, but I think it changes March, April, and May when season tickets hit people, boosters, alums, mailboxes and email addresses, especially club level and suites. So they want the juice. Ole Miss is going to get a bump automatically, as you know, Paul, because anytime you have a new coach, you get that. And then when you have Lane Kiffin, you get it even more. So MSU took a step back season ticket wise this past year for the first time since, I don't know, when Mullen and Byrne and Keenum all joined the stage at the same time in 2009. And so they feel like they need a win and they need some juice going in the off season to make sure that they're not just packed in club level and suites and in between the 30s, but that there's a waiting list like there's been the last decade.
Welcome back. It is Thursday, and glad you're with us. Don't forget, tomorrow we will have the Archbishop on, our final hour, Archbishop Joe Marino, to talk about his year and hopefully converse with you about the holidays and the meaning of Christmas. Always one of the highlights of the year. Also great to have Nicole Araback on. Nicole, thanks so much for being with us from the Athletic. I'll get it right. From the Athletic, Nicole had an extraordinary conversation with Jim Delaney as he heads for his final couple of days as the Big Ten commissioner. Nicole, it was good to see you a couple of months ago when you were down hanging out with us doing a piece on Laura, and it's even better to have you on this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about Jim Delaney. He's one of the most influential people in the history of college athletics. He is about to walk away after leading the Big Ten to such heights. Tell us about your conversation.
Yeah, well, he's his last day will be the Rose Bowl, and he is kind of making the rounds and kind of reflecting on 30 years of the Big Ten and all the changes that the sport has had, college football has had. As well as the whole college athletic scene and setup, the name, image, and likeness, the existential threats to the amateurism model, and all of those things. So we talked about a lot of those things, and about his tenure in the Big Ten, and if he would do anything over again. A lot of people have wondered about Rutgers and Maryland. Would you want to mulligan on that decision? And he will defend that, and he will stand by that. But just really about the changes, even in the media landscape, in the sport, in the way that college football has grown. We talked a little bit about, the playoff, whether it's been good for the sport, and really, what he sees that looking like moving forward. And it really was stunning to hear someone who really was the reason we didn't have a college football playoff sooner talking about expecting this thing to expand probably when the contract's up in 2026. So it was a very interesting conversation, very introspective. from someone, like you said, who has been incredibly influential in college sports, and really stepping away. It's going to be a very different dynamic in the landscape, in the commissioners' meetings, and really everywhere.
And Nicole, you've certainly been at the vanguard of that reporting on the expansion of the college football playoff. Take us through what he said and really what it perhaps could mean.
Yeah, well, I wanted to know, first of all, if he felt that it had been good for the sport to get to this 4-team playoff. And he says that he thinks it has. I mean, the sport is continuing to get more and more popular. But one thing that he's brought up, and, you've started to hear it from a couple other commissioners as well, is that when you went from having 2 teams that get to play for a national championship to 4, it really started to highlight who isn't getting there, who isn't. We didn't really talk about it in the same way, like, the Big Ten hasn't been in the national championship game in X amount of years. We talked about not winning it, but now it's, are you not in it? And, is your champion not in it? How many times has the Pac-12 been left out? And all of that because the access point has doubled. So, Jim Delaney, and we've heard similar things from other conference commissioners, including Larry Scott. I mean, there are people who have talked about conference championships, strength of schedule, things not being rewarded in the way that they felt they should, and that's caused them to have their teams left out. So, we talked about that, and then I thought it was really interesting. He pointed out that the fastest way to get to expansion would be if the ACC or the SEC were left out, because they have not experienced that. And he's saying he doesn't wish it on anybody, but, quote, I don't think you fully appreciate the damage that's done when conferences are left out 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in a row. And I think he's right that, we've kind of been saying that from the start. If the SEC were ever to be left out of the playoff one year, all of a sudden the drumbeat for expansion would happen. So I think he's absolutely right about that. And the timeline, he said, there's a lot of contracts, there's a lot of things that would have to, be worked out in order to expand before the contract with ESPN is up in 2026. But he used the word probably for expansion in 2026 when that deal is up. So, that was very interesting to hear, again, from someone who really was an obstacle to getting to a playoff setting in the first place.
Yeah, and I know he's alluded to it, but in 2004, when Auburn had a perfect season and did not get the invite to the championship game, the BCS game, Mike Slive went on a rampage, and that opened the door for what we would later have. Just in terms of on that front, I mean, we know the obstacles, and we talked to commissioners, especially the one who runs the SEC, and they love the conference championship games. But we a week and a half, nearly 2 removed from them. What are your thoughts based on what you've talked to him and others about? Because that's always going to be the obstacle for some of these Power 5 commissioners. And you'd almost have to do away with them, wouldn't you?
Well, that's definitely one way about to fix this or to expand. The interesting thing right now that there are more conversations about expansion, what it would look like, what people would prefer, is that people really do have strong feelings about the model. If you go to 8, the model that they would prefer. And there are some people who are proponents of keeping the conference championship games and basically just adding 1 game to the season for 2 teams. And, you've started to hear people ask the playoff teams or coaches that have played in the playoffs, have played 15 games, what that would mean. What is that wear and tear like on the players? Last year, I talked to some of the coaches of Division II and FCS teams that had played 16 games about that wear and tear. So that is one route to add a game and keep the conference championship. Or you get rid of them and you do quarterfinals on, that weekend that we're used to seeing conference championships. And I think certain leagues certainly have different levels of attachment to their conference championship game, because as you guys know, the SEC championship game is the biggest deal, and it matters a lot. The fans go, and it's like a playoff atmosphere. It's not like that in every other conference. So, again, the preferences change depending on who you're talking to. But I do think those are probably that is probably the biggest question outside of contracts and agreements and things like that. It really would be, are you going to talk about adding a game and consider the player health and wellness and welfare issues tied to that, or do you get rid of this, which is so important for the culture of some of these conferences, and that could be a really sticking point for them? That's really, it just changes depending on who you talk to.
Nicole, it was either last year or the year before, and I must admit I can't remember which one it was, that you did the reporting on the possibility of some people moving more quickly than not. Today, I understand what Jim Delaney has said, but are we any closer to getting to an 18 playoff before this contract ends?
Well, I mean, as you know, these things move slowly. This is a sport where, even if people agree on things, it still takes time to get to the actual setup and to see like a format proposed and a structure. So no, we're not actually closer, except we are in the point that a year ago, people weren't even talking about this stuff publicly. They weren't even talking about it privately in the right rooms, in the meetings of commissioners, in meetings with people that can actually make change happen. And now that has changed. The conversation, the tone, the feeling of inevitability with certain coaches and athletic directors and commissioners about this has changed. So again, it would still take a lot of people really, really, really wanting this thing to expand, to deal with the contracts, to deal with what we were just talking about, the conference championship game question or the length of the season question, and then to really actually propose what this setup would look like and get enough consensus around it. But, stranger things have happened in sports. If things happen, if certain leagues are left out, or you have maybe too many of one league just dominating a series of years, if the SEC is getting two in, 1 year and then back to back the next year, and all these people are missing out on that slice of the pie, you could see more pressure applied. The public, when I reported about this last year, the public went nuts. People would love to see, more teams get in the hunt for this thing. And they would love to see, even if it's a UCF as an 8 seed, give them a chance. If they get crushed by Alabama, they get crushed by Alabama, but it's the point of access that some people want to see. So I don't know if we're any closer, but I do know that the fact that these are open conversations is drastically different than what it was a year ago. And you need to have that point before you can get to the point of proposing models and really examining contracts. You need to be talking about it. So I still think probably the most realistic setup here is when the contract's up in 2026 and you have this time to come up with those proposals, get everyone on board. But the fact that these are open conversations is a significant development, I think. Just it's very different than what it was the first 5 years of this contract.
Well, and of course, the same thing going on with name, image, and likeness. I guess the exit question is, does anything move quickly in intercollegiate athletics? I think we know the answer.
Yeah, the answer is no. And the only reason that the name, image, and likeness stuff is picking up speed is because of the outside pressure from Congress and from state legislatures. And that is usually how change happens in the NCAA system when people make it. So similar, the playoff is not in the same boat. It's not NCAA run, but it all of a sudden pressure can be applied from outside sources like fans and certain commissioners and certain leagues if they're being left out. That's how things get changed. But otherwise, if there isn't an impetus for change, there isn't an impetus for change.
Nicole, thanks. Great to have you on. Always really special. Hope to see you soon.
Yes, thanks so much. Happy holidays.
Great stuff from Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic. So a year ago, we were all excited. Maybe something was going to happen. A year later, we'll wait to the end of the contract in 2026. That's only 6 years away. Yeah. I can wait. Didn't think anything was going to happen anyway. We'll take a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285. It's been a really last couple of years. Not a bad record for a program that looks like it just came alive this year. Bookends 11 and 19. Championship game appearances, a couple of near misses. Les Miles and Coach O.
And they might top it off with one more national championship. Would be a good way to end the decade for sure. LSU kind of feels like they were the dominant team at the SEC at the start of the decade. They went and wandered in the wilderness for a while Saban sort of took over.
Team at the end of the decade too, right?
They've come full circle and they're back. What do you think? What do you think about LSU, Paul? Give us your honest feelings.
I'm pretty bullish on them.
You're pretty bullish. I like it. That's good. Well, let's check out the Mount Rushmore then. And this one,
a little controversial.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought for a second because I knew this was coming up, and I'm pretty.
Joey Burrow made it. We knew that.
Yeah, yep. I'm a little terrified of the backlash of this one because there's some pretty good people that got left off.
Honey Badger has to make it. I think he's probably the most famous LSU player of the decade.
You can't have a not You can't go without a DB.
And then we put in Leonard Fournette, who's probably the biggest recruit they've had this decade, you would definitely say.
Yeah, some discussion over Fournette versus Darius Geis. I think Fournette definitely a bigger star. Geis, you could say, had a slightly better numbers.
And then
at LSU.
I'd go Leonard.
Yeah, it was a pretty easy choice, but there was discussion.
This
was the tough one,
over Eric Reed and Patrick Peterson.
Right.
The thought was Devin White's probably easily the best linebacker in LSU history.
Right. He's their only Butkus Award winner. But if Patrick Peterson sees this, Patrick, don't come after me, because I would have put you on there, man. This one's not on me. I was overruled by a majority vote.
You know
on that
the problem
one,
with this, and I've seen some tweets from some pretty famous players. I'm going to be running into some all-pro guy on the streets in a few weeks, and he won't speak to me because he thinks that
that you did
the him on the Mount Rushmore team.
Right. We should clarify. It is, kind of the staff put it together. We consulted you, but we didn't.
Let me
you're not to be held responsible.
You may have consulted me, but I don't remember.
I do not recall.
You should not be held responsible. Yeah. Well, the show meetings get earlier and earlier, but
I can't get here before 2:45. Yeah. Come on.
How about Joey Burrow playing his way on there, though? The end of the decade, just one of the more remarkable LSU careers. He's going to be.
You think he deserves it over Jordan Jefferson?
It's tough. I think I have to side with him.
I think he does. Yeah. I think the Heisman puts him over the edge on that one.
Okay, just want to make sure.
So.
I think Nick Saban might have put Jordan Jefferson on his personal LSU Mount Rushmore.
I think Jordan is his favorite LSU player. Welcome back. Great to have you on board, and we're going to continue with more calls at 855-242-7285. Rabelais will join us shortly. And right now, let's check in with Richard, who is in Texas.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you very much.
I'm a Tennessee fan, and it looks like they had a pretty good recruiting year.
They really did.
I see that Rivals has them the class ranked number 9. And then ESPN says number 18, and I'm trying to understand the two ranking systems and how they're different. Is one better than the other?
Listen, I'm supposed to tell you that everything at ESPN is great, but I'm going to tell you that I don't really know that to be true. ESPN bases its rankings off of I think it's ESPN 300. All the other ones have their own systems. I try to do a composite. Because that way you take some of the biases out, and I'm here to tell you every recruiting service has a bias.
Okay.
I'm sure I just made a lot of friends at the ESPN recruiting department. But anyway, hey, thanks for the call. I hate to run, but we have a guest, Scott Rabelais, joining us a couple of weeks ago. He followed Jeff Foxworthy, so this will be easier, I suspect. Scott, good afternoon.
Oh, I thought you'd have me between Nicole Kidman and Margot Robbie promoting the movie Bombshell.
Yeah, it was only Nicole Araback, but Nicole Kidman will be on later to talk about the Tom Cruise years.
Can't wait.
I ran into Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban about 2 years ago at an event in Nashville, and I was struck how tall she was. That's the only thing I could remember. I thought, wow. And Keith Urban was really friendly. That struck me too. But anyway, none of that has anything to do with this conversation. What has to do with this conversation is very simple. What's the deal? We heard Ogeron last night dodge the question about Allaire. What do you know, if you know anything?
We know he's hurt. We know he was carted off from practice Tuesday. They said just to keep him from to walk on his hurt hamstring into the football facility. Obviously, in return to practice, these things take a couple of days, I'm told, to kind of work themselves out, and if you know the extent of an injury to a hamstring. So I really don't think they know, if he's going to be available next Saturday or not. If you had to ask me right now, I would tend to say no. I think the hope would be to get him back for the national championship game if they advance there. But they're kind of waiting to see. They're certainly talking about having to play running back by committee with the three freshmen, Tyrion Davis-Price, John Emery, and Chris Curry.
Which brings me to the most obvious question, Scott. You cover the team. We know how great he is. Let's take him off the board and say he's not quite ready. What does that mean? What does that do to the LSU offense?
Well, he was the first team All SEC running back. He's a run for 1,200 yards this year. He's a great pass catcher. 50 catches this season, and he is a very good blocker. And they put him. He's in the backfield with Joe. He's in the slot. They put him all the way out wide to the boundary, is when they go 5 wides at times. They've done that a lot this year. It's a blow, and no question. Now, of course, on the flip side, Oklahoma's down their top rushing, their top sack player and 2 other players who are suspended for the Peach Bowl. So maybe those things kind of balance out. I think by committee they can kind of fill a lot of the voids, but just having a veteran like Clyde who knows where to go and what to do on every play is very important to this offense. And it would be a blow if he can't play. I think probably the best you could hope for if LSU, he can kind of be like DeAndre Swift was for in the SEC championship game, that you can use him on a limited basis. But that's going to be the question of the day every day next week in Atlanta, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you got to figure out, listen, if we can win without him, let's save him for New Orleans, but that's a risky proposition. But it just, I know what the coaches will say starting upon arrival in the ATL, but Scott, you know the personnel down there, you know what they've done, and you've got a decent observation on Oklahoma like the rest of us. Do you see it being that big of a deal?
LSU can based on the battle of attrition that you have with the 2 teams right now, with Oklahoma's suspensions and Clyde being a huge question mark. LSU is still close to a 2-touchdown favorite. That has not changed very much. So Joe Burrow, I imagine they're going to have him encased in bubble wrap between now and next.
They ought to send him somewhere other than the practice field right now.
Exactly. Someone taste his food, all that sort of thing. You still have all those receivers, including Jamar Chase, the Blitnikoff Award winner. And a very capable tight end in Thad Moss. So there's still a lot of weapons. And Tyrion Davis-Price did some good things at times as well too. Clyde is more of the very shifty runner. People probably remember that spin move he put on McKinney in the Alabama game to score a touchdown late in the game. Davis-Price is more the traditional-looking LSU back, run over you, between the tackles. So they still got talent, but it's not all wrapped up into one package like it is with Clyde.
Yeah, I mean, listen, because LSU was not in very many close games, is it more difficult to gauge his absolute importance? I mean, I know how good he was, well, we all do, but give us your best guess. I mean, if this game were to get close, wouldn't that be where LSU felt his loss the most?
So I think that would be the case. I mean, they'd never had a game this year where they had to score late and come from behind. And, you could get in that kind of shootout with Oklahoma, with Jalen Hurts, the quote-unquote, LSU killer from his days at Alabama. Sure. And I think it probably will mean that Joe Burrow probably takes a little more on his shoulders in terms of the running game. Joe, at times, will tuck it and run. I mean, we saw him do that against Alabama this year, for example. But people may remember he had a long run against Georgia last year, that late in the game that was kind of a highlight, and he rushed for a lot of yards at Texas A&M in that 7 overtime game. So I would think Joe, being Joe, will probably put a little more on his own shoulders with Clyde out, if that's the case.
Scott, let's move on to yesterday. Orgeron seemed really upbeat. I know LSU lost a couple of players at the end. Everyone does. But from what you've been able to glean, knowing the in and out of that staff, and also talking to experts and people within the program, what would your evaluation be based on everything you've heard of yesterday on National Signing Day?
I think it was a very good day. I mean, if you're in the top 5, you've had a very good day, and it's what you got to do. And you see all these other SEC programs that are ranked in the top 10 in recruiting. They still have 6 spots to fill, and so they're going to have to go out and get a running back, because everyone expects Clyde's going to go pro. And their number 1 target is this Evans kid out of Houston North Shore, who they say may pick a school at the Under Armour game on January 2nd. They want another defensive lineman or 2. They might like another safety or a cornerback or something like that. But so they still got to get a running back. They got 2 quarterbacks, one of them being Max Johnson, Brad Johnson's son, right near Athens in Watkinsville. They got a good tackle in Mark Emerville out of Florida. They got a rush linebacker in Philip Webb, also out of Georgia. So they filled a lot of needs. The striking thing about this LSU class, Paul, given how how much talent Louisiana produces every year, that only 5 of LSU's 19 signees were from the state of Louisiana. And they let a couple go as well. A couple of local guys who they had long committed. Major Burns being one of them, and the defensive back. So they playing that game where they're trying to opt out of some players to get some better, for the chance to get some better ones. It's a bit of a dangerous game, and playing this game where you're going all over the country. They've had some wins and losses. They lost the receiver out of Washington, Jarrett, to Maryland, and they lost a player to Clemson. So they lost about 3 players yesterday who could have filled some holes, but they're still in position to get some of these highly uncommitted players. And Evans, for example, certainly is one of them.
It seemed like for an incredibly long time, the frustration down there was losing important players to Alabama. You know that. Because of Saban's prowess and his recruiting ability. What were some of those battles like yesterday?
It doesn't seem like there was many one-on-one battles with Alabama. It was more like, LSU versus, lost a player to Maryland, which is kind of a strange one. Lost a player to Clemson. Battling with Georgia. Not quite as many one-on-ones with Alabama this year in state. Possibly just because LSU didn't go offering to as many players in state as they usually do. It's not as good a year in Louisiana as it typically is, or it might be next year.
Talk a little bit beyond Joe Burrow about the quarterback situation down there.
Well, yeah, after Joe, of course, Miles Brennan looks like the heir apparent, but they have 2 quarterbacks on the roster already with him, and then they have 2 quarterbacks coming in next year. T.J. Finley, one of the kids they signed from Louisiana, from Ponchatoula, and then Max Johnson, who I mentioned. So they've got some. They're going to create some. It's not going to be an automatic thing for Brennan next year. They're going to create some competition for him, and he's got the experience and has been in this system now for a year with Joe Brady, this Joe Brady Stevens Minger combination. So he's got the advantage, but I don't think anyone's expecting he's going to be Joe Burrow next year, certainly. But Joe, obviously, as everyone saw, improved tremendously from last year to this. So I'm sure they're hoping from some improvements from Miles Brennan, maybe not as much, but similar vein.
Scott, may not be easy to answer, but is there a transfer portal target?
The Derek King, the quarterback who left Houston, is someone who has been mentioned a lot. Is a kind of a dual threat guy you think would maybe fit in well with what LSU likes to do. So that's a possibility. Ed didn't talk about that position specifically yesterday, but he said he did mention with the 6 spots they have left that they would certainly be open to transfers or grad transfers or whatever. Maybe another junior college guy even. I don't think they want a junior college quarterback, but another player like that if it was the right player at the right position.
King's a player who decided to quit playing early in the season for Houston, said he wanted to come back next year, and quite frankly, nobody believed him.
Yeah, it's an unusual situation, but this is the way of college football these days. Obviously, with these transfer quarterbacks, they go all over the place, and obviously, no one benefited more from that than LSU.
Scott, assuming LSU gets out of Atlanta, and we assume they will, how crazy will it be trying to find tickets for LSU fans in New Orleans?
I think they held off a little bit. The crowd was a lot more lopsided in Georgia than I originally expected for the SEC championship game. I'm hearing a lot more people. They sold their allotment, only 13,000 tickets for each school, but they sold their allotment for the Peach Bowl. And there are a lot of LSU alums in Atlanta. I think people will turn out for that game. But yeah, people are really counting on LSU being right down the road. Paul, as you probably remember, the last 3 times the national championship game has been played in New Orleans, LSU has been in it. So, it just seems kind of. I really don't want to go off on a mystic bent or anything like that, but there does seem to be kind of an aura of destiny around this team. They've swept up all these awards. They mixed this potion with the offense this year, and it just came up. They came up with gold, like this alchemy, and they did bake gold. Look at that. And this thing so it kind of makes you think maybe the Clyde situation won't turn out to be as bad as it could be either. But yeah, I think there's a huge expectation from everyone here that they're going to be the championship game's going to New Orleans, and LSU will be playing in it.
Yeah, and final thing, Scott, I mean, you work for a newspaper that's also very prominent in that part of the state. Online is important. I'm just guessing here. I would imagine LSU football has been good to your employers this fall.
We have monetized the Tigers quite well in terms of poster sales and if you're picking up subscriptions and stuff like that. Yeah, it's Joe Burrow can't make any money off of his name, image, and likeness, but I got to say a lot of media outlets are like us.
Well, it's good.
Sure.
It's good to see the industry that we both have worked so hard in finally catch a break. Scott, enjoy the
once in a while.
Yeah, everyone. I hope you enjoy Christmas. We will see you in Atlanta. Look forward to talking, and we promise when we invite you next Thursday or Friday, whenever your schedule permits, that you will be a standalone guest. There won't be any former Hollywood star or matinee idol that gets in the way of your limelight.
Boy, that was any limelight I had was totally overshadowed by those guys. But it was Jeff Foxworthy was very, very nice.
He was hilarious. No, see you in Atlanta. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Paul. Happy holidays.
Thanks. Scott is one of the hardest working guys in the industry, one of the nicest and one of the best. And for those who didn't understand the inside joke, he followed Jeff Foxworthy, who I think may be the guest of the year on this program, only to have Rick, the Nature Boy Flair, follow him, which may be the second best guest or the best guest. I mean, we had an hour and a half in Atlanta that was as good as we've ever had, and it just so happened that Scott was sandwiched in between them and still did his job, by the way. We will take a break. More to come on this Thursday afternoon.
We talked about how LSU's dominance kind of bookends the decade, and they came all the way back. What do you think, Jamari?
LSU is such the enigma to me in the SEC because, like you said, they started the decade great. They're going to end the decade great, but all the stuff in the middle is a little concerning with going between Les Miles, giving Edo the job, Edo proving that he deserved the job. But I mean, to end the year with the Heisman, right? To end the decade with the Heisman, I should say, is pretty great. Yeah,
I feel like for a couple years, LSU fans sort of built up a sympathy. They moved a little bit more towards from their position of dominance into a little bit more of a lovable loser category. Now they're sort of back to the top. We still got love for LSU fans, but I'm going to ask. My plea is, let's wear it a little bit better this time. Wear the crown a little bit more graciously, a little more humbly this time around, LSU fans, and not be out there, if you ain't a tiger, you're tiger bait and all that.
So a fan base has not handled winning correctly. Is that what you're?
Well, it's all love. It's all love. What do you think, Paul?
Great. Can't believe you're dissing them.
It's not so much a diss. It is just a gentle request.
By the way, I can't remember the last time I heard an LSU fan talk like that. It's been a while.
Right. We're starting to hear it more and more as the calls come through. So
yeah, we'll see. Good luck, LSU.
Thank you. Well, let's move along and talk to Cat Daddy. Cat Daddy?
Yeah, Mr. Finebaum.
That's me.
I got a friend of mine came up to me today. He's the Reverend Tommy Huggins at the Baptist Church in St. Matthews, South Carolina.
Okay.
And he said to tell you he loves your show.
Now, what does he do at the church?
He's the preacher.
Oh, my goodness.
And since I mentioned,
he's a preacher man.
He's going to talk about you in church on Sunday and mention that he got on the radio and the television.
Oh, my.
He told me how much he loved watching your show, and he's a big Gamecock fan like me.
I said something a couple weeks ago when Rice Plumlee was on. He talked about Tua. John David Plumlee. I'm so confused right now. What's Plumlee's first name? John Rice. He's got too many names for me, these guys in Mississippi. When John Rice Plumlee came on, he paid tribute to Tua and talked about his faith and how his Christianity and faith were more important than anything else. And a friend of mine in Knoxville told me that the minister got up and used the show and used the interview with John as an example. He said, look, half the people in the pews about fell out that the Finebaum show was being quoted on Sunday morning in church.
Well, you fix to get quoted again, I can guarantee you that. But I got to read something from the newspaper here.
Yeah.
That talked about you criticizing Clemson.
Oh, really?
And Dabo's response was, Paul Finebaum does a great job. He's good at what he does. But I don't take advice from people I wouldn't ask for advice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you still think in the papers down here in South Carolina.
Well, listen, I'm thinking about maybe trying to do a show in South Carolina.
Well, come on down. I wish the 107.5 here would put you on the radio here. They got some guys on there. That was the ones that I said that you had better ratings than CNN and MSNBC combined. But I wish.
Well, listen, we're not looking to displace any local show in any market because we are available in a few places. I'm a big, listen, I got my start in local radio, and this show is a little bit different. I realize in every market in the country, people want to hear about their teams.
Well, you do a great job at what you do, Miss Finebaum. Ain't no doubt about that. I enjoy watching it. And then
will you tell the preacher man that we appreciate the kind words, especially the Sunday before Christmas?
I sure will, Mr. Finebaum. And you have a great night tonight. And God bless you all.
Thank you very much. Speaking of clergy, we'll have Father Marino on tomorrow, and can't wait for that. I always feel a little better after he's on, don't you? Like maybe some of the egregious sins of mine aren't quite as bad now that I've spoken to the Archbishop, who by the way, I'm not talking out of school. He normally goes through Rome and the Vatican on the way back. Have I ever told you that story? A couple of years ago, I was flying. He always comes back right after Thanksgiving. This year, he came back a little bit later because he's moving to Rome. He's got a new assignment there as the president of some, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. But so I'm on a plane. We're about to take off, and a couple of my producers were around me, and Archbishop Marino called me. And you talk on a plane, people can hear. And he had just gotten back to Birmingham, and he had been in Rome and had an audience with Pope Francis. And I didn't mean to blurt this out, but I said, so how was the Holy See? How was the Pontiff? So what did Pope Francis say to you? And all of a sudden, people started turning around. They thought I was just making this up, but Joe had literally spent a good bit of time with Pope Francis, and I tried to explain to my friends afterward that I was having a serious conversation, and to this day they swear I was just name dropping, like somebody would really drop the Pope's name on an American Airlines flight. Anyway, I'd say that for the show, right here. We'll take a break.
Overall, what stands out to me, this is a high character group. You look at their GPAs, you can tell that their future is important to them, even outside of football, and that's what we're looking for, and that's the way we're building this thing. So very excited about this class, and like I said, there could be a few more before it's all said and done. Really big. We signed 4, and really felt like we needed to. Like we said, we wanted to get a little longer, and we did that. Like I said, Colby Hudson's very unique from the standpoint that he can play quarterback too. So, you could see him, possibly even take some snaps there at times, whether it's wildcat or just package type deal. But, all 4 of those guys are playmakers. They're very good with the ball in their hands, and like I said, we're excited. And I know Bo Nix is excited that we got all 4 of them too. It's real, and it's not just recruits, it's players, current players all around the country. Everything is more magnified than it ever has been. We choose to build this thing with talent, with character, And then, like I said, I think it's important that when you recruit, you're recruiting families too, families that fit, fit the philosophy and fit Auburn. And so, that's what we've done, and this year has been one of our best classes with all that. And I think that'll help in the future too. And like I said, this day in college football, it's different. It's the college football day of the portal, where there's a lot of changes and all that. And so we're trying to, really be specific on what we're looking for as a recruit. I mean, there's other guys that we could have had that probably could have helped the recruiting rankings and all that, but we're very specific, and we're very blessed to get this type of a class, not just from a talent standpoint, but from a character standpoint. We felt like we had to have a few guys that we felt that were ready to play. I mean, that's why we signed the 2 junior college guys, when we could also take another grad transfer possibly too, if an opportunity presented itself. And then we wanted some guys that could build this thing. And we have the freshmen. We think all 3 are excellent players, and 2 of them are going to get here early, which I think is important, and just kind of building that offensive line depth for the future. You can't have enough depth at the running back position in our league, and you've seen that throughout the years. But we're building this thing the right way. Coach Cadillac is doing a real good job. A lot of those running backs are pretty versatile too. So, there could be times you could see 2 running backs on the field at the same time.